This story is titled Kicked Out as a Teen for False Rumors Spread by My Stepsister. Years later, they see my success and demand money. Hey guys, I'm Liam. I'm 20 now, but this story starts when I was just a kid, about 10 years old. Back then, life was simple. It was just me and my dad. He was my best friend, my hero, the kind of guy who always had my back no matter what. We'd spend weekends playing video games, working on little projects like building a model car, or binging sci-fi movies while eating way too much popcorn. My dad was my everything. And then, one day, he was gone. Just like that. It happened so fast. One morning, he was fine. By afternoon, he'd had a heart attack. And by evening, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room trying to understand how my world had just fallen apart. No warnings, no goodbyes, just gone. Losing him didn't just hurt. It completely wrecked me. He wasn't just my dad. He was the only person who really understood me. I kept thinking, at least I still have my mom, right? We'll get through this together. Within a few months of my dad passing, my mom was suddenly moving on. Her words, not mine. She started seeing this guy named Steve. He wasn't just bad news. He was the whole bad news network. Steve was loud, obnoxious, and always had to be the center of attention. And as if that wasn't enough, he came with a daughter, Sophie. Sophie was a year older than me, and let me tell you, she was a nightmare from day one. She had this way of acting like she owned the world. And me. Steve treated her like some kind of princess. And my mom? She just went along with it. Before I knew it, Steve and Sophie moved in. I didn't even get a heads up. One day I came home from school, and they were just there. And then things started disappearing. My stuff, my space, my life. First, it was my room. Sophie decided she wanted the bigger, nicer room, aka mine, and instead of telling her no, my mom and Steve went along with it. My posters? Gone. My books and Lego sets? Shoved in the garage. My bed? Replaced with this ugly, frilly nightmare Sophie picked out. I got moved into the tiny guest room like I didn't even matter. It didn't stop there. Every little thing I had, Sophie wanted. My bike? Gone. My gaming console? Stolen. If I tried to say no, Steve would go on about how Sophie deserves it more because she's older or more responsible. Yeah, sure, Steve. Responsible kids totally need 2 bikes and my limited edition games. But it wasn't just about the stuff. Steve made it his mission to make my life hell. He criticized everything I did, from how I loaded the dishwasher to how I did my homework. If I forgot to take the trash out one time, he'd act like I'd burned the house down. And the worst part? He constantly compared me to Sophie. Sophie's so much smarter. Sophie's so much more respectful. Sophie would never make a mess like this. It was like living in a bad sitcom where I was the punchline for every joke. And my mom? She didn't stand up for me, not even once. She'd either agree with Steve or stay completely silent, which honestly felt worse. It was like she just stopped caring. I kept telling myself things would get better, that maybe this was just an adjustment period. But as the months dragged on, it became painfully clear. This wasn't temporary. This was my new reality. By the time I turned 12, I'd learned how to survive, or at least how to stay under the radar. But Sophie thrived in her role as the golden child. Steve worshipped her, and my mom bent over backward to make her happy. Meanwhile, I was invisible, unless someone needed someone to blame. And trust me, Sophie was great at that. At first, it was small stuff. She'd spill a drink and blame me. She'd lose her homework, and somehow that was my fault too. My mom and Steve always believed her. I'd get grounded or yelled at for stuff I didn't even do. But Sophie didn't stop there. She got creative, the worst thing she ever pulled. I'd just aced this huge math test. A big deal because I sucked at math. My teacher even made a point to compliment me in front of the class. For the first time in forever, I felt proud of myself. But of course, Sophie couldn't let me have that. I was walking home from school that day when Sophie intercepted me. She had that fake sweet smile she always used when she was about to screw me over. "Hey, Liam," she said. "Can I borrow your backpack? Mine's broken." Now, I didn't trust her, obviously. But if I said no, Steve would find some way to twist it into me being selfish. So I handed over my bag, and Sophie skipped off like she just won a prize. The next morning, everything went to hell. I got called into the principal's office out of nowhere. I'd never been in trouble at school, so I had no idea what was going on. When I walked in, there was Sophie, crying her crocodile tears. The principal held up a stack of test papers, stolen test papers, and said they'd been found in my backpack. My brain short-circuited. I tried to explain that I had no idea how they got there, but Sophie jumped in with this award-winning performance. "I saw him sneaking them out of the teacher's desk," she cried. "I told him it was wrong, but he wouldn't listen. It was all a lie, but nobody believed me. The principal just shook his head, and before I knew it, I was being expelled. Not suspended, expelled. My mom had to come pick me up, and the entire way home, Steve was losing his mind in the car. "You're a disgrace," he shouted. "How could you embarrass this family like that?" I kept trying to defend myself, but Steve wasn't having it. My mom didn't say a word. When we got home, Steve told me to pack my things. "You're not staying here," he said. I thought my mom would stop him. I thought she'd stand up for me, or at least ask for more time to figure things out, but she didn't. She just let it happen. That night, I left with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a whole lot of resentment. My mom didn't say goodbye. She didn't try to stop Steve. She didn't even look at me as I walked out the door. But Steve didn't just kick me out over the test papers or even the usual lazy, disrespectful spiel. Oh no, he decided to dig up every single thing he could pin on me, no matter how ridiculous or unrelated. It was like he'd been holding onto a grudge list for years, just waiting for the right moment to unload it all at once. First, Steve accused me of ruining Sophie's birthday last year. What did I do? Did I set the cake on fire? Did I pop all her balloons? Nope. I showed up late because I had to work a shift at my part-time job. I even texted her to let her know I'd be late, but somehow that made me selfish and unsupportive. Never mind that I handed her a gift card worth half my paycheck because I couldn't afford anything fancy. According to Steve, I didn't make her feel special. So clearly, I was the worst brother in the world. Then he brought up the infamous Wi-Fi incident. A few months ago, Sophie and I had a small fight over the router because she wanted to stream some makeup tutorial while I needed to upload a school project. Apparently, me asking her to wait 10 minutes was proof that I didn't respect her passions. Steve even threw in, "You could have failed that project and it wouldn't have mattered as much as Sophie's dreams." Yeah, okay, Steve, because contouring tutorials are definitely more important than my grades. But the real was when he blamed me for the time our cat Mittens ran away. I didn't even know he was serious at first. I thought he was joking, but nope, dead serious. He claimed it was my fault because I left the window open. For the record, I wasn't even home that day. It was Sophie who opened the window to air out the smell of nail polish. But somehow, in Steve's mind, I was still responsible because, as the older sibling, you should have been watching her. The cat came back 2 days later, by the way, but Steve conveniently left that part out of his rant. Then, there was the time I got sick and stayed home from a family dinner. Apparently, me having the flu was ruining family bonding. Steve went on this tirade about how I didn't value traditions and always had an excuse to avoid the family. I was literally lying in bed with a fever of 102. But sure, Steve, I totally faked being sick to get out of eating overcooked turkey. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Steve hit me with the Christmas tree story. A couple of years ago, I accidentally knocked over the Christmas tree while reaching for an ornament. It was a total accident. I even helped clean it up right after, but Steve never let it go. He actually brought it up as if it was some major betrayal of trust. "You've been careless for years, Liam. Remember when you ruined Christmas?" Ruined Christmas. Because of a tree. I was 15. What was I supposed to do? Defy gravity? The most insane accusation, though? Steve said I was the reason their car got a flat tire last month. I wasn't even in the car when it happened. Sophie borrowed it to go to some party, but Steve insisted I must have done something to it, because I'd been the last one to take out the trash near the driveway. He genuinely thought I sabotaged the car out of spite. Like, yes, Steve, I'm clearly a master of tire destruction in my free time. By the end of it, I felt like I was in some twisted sitcom where every ridiculous misunderstanding got pinned on me. Steve basically painted me as the ultimate villain in the story of Sophie's perfect life. Meanwhile, Sophie just stood there with her fake tears and innocent, "I'm so hurt" act. She even added, "I don't know why Liam hates me so much." Like she wasn't the mastermind behind all of this. Steve's final words as I walked out the door, "Maybe being out on your own will teach you some responsibility." Yeah, Steve, because getting framed for stealing test papers, ruining birthdays, and scaring off cats clearly screams irresponsible. So here I am, sitting on my grandpa's couch with a garbage bag full of clothes, wondering how I became the family scapegoat for every weird, random thing that's ever happened. If you're wondering whether I've heard from them since I left, not a single text, call, or apology. But knowing Steve, he's probably still blaming me for stuff, like global warming or the traffic on his way to work. Living with my grandpa felt like stepping into a completely different world. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. He didn't yell, didn't criticize me for every little mistake, and most importantly, he didn't treat me like a burden. He gave me a safe place to just exist and figure out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was angry all the time. At Steve, At Sophie, at my mom, and honestly, at the universe for taking my dad away. My grandpa must have noticed, but he didn't push me to talk about it. Instead, he handed me an old laptop one day and said, "Here, see if you can get this thing working again. It's been sitting in my closet forever." I didn't think much of it at first, but I sat down and started tinkering. It was slow going, but something about fixing that dusty old laptop felt satisfying. It gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. When I finally got it running, I showed it to my grandpa, expecting him to just say, "Good job." Instead, he said, "You've got a knack for this. Maybe you could turn it into something more." That planted a seed in my brain. Around the same time, I started playing around with design software. My dad had introduced me to it when I was a kid. He was a mechanical engineer and used to show me how he created blueprints for projects. I downloaded a free trial of a 3D design program and started teaching myself the basics. Before long, I was hooked. By the time I hit high school, I had a solid routine. I'd go to school during the day, come home, and spend my evenings teaching myself how to code and design. I wasn't some prodigy or anything, but I liked the challenge. Plus, it felt good to build something for myself, something no one could take away. Meanwhile, my mom, Steve, and Sophie stayed in the background of my life like a bad memory I couldn't quite shake. My mom texted me a couple of times in the first few months after I moved in with my grandpa, but it was always surface-level stuff like, "Hope you're doing okay," or "Let me know if you need anything." She never apologized or even acknowledged what had happened. Steve? Radio silence, which was fine by me. Sophie, though, couldn't resist stirring the pot. She'd send me these smug texts every so often, bragging about her perfect life. "Dad just got me a new car." Or, "Mom and I are in Hawaii. You should come visit." Oh wait, never mind. It pissed me off, sure, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of responding. Instead, I threw myself into my work. By the time I turned 16, I was doing small freelance gigs, designing logos, fixing laptops, and even building websites for local businesses. It wasn't much, but it felt amazing to earn my own money. My grandpa was my biggest cheerleader, always telling his friends about what I was working on and drumming up business for me. One day, he handed me a stack of bills, cash from the neighbors he'd convinced to hire me to update their computer systems. "You've got a talent, kid," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Hearing that meant everything. After years of being told I wasn't good enough, it felt like someone finally believed in me. But no matter how well things were going, I couldn't stop thinking about my mom. I kept replaying the moment she stood there, silent, while Steve threw me out. Part of me wanted to call her, to yell at her, and demand answers. But the other part of me, the bigger part, just wanted to forget she existed. The thing is, forgetting isn't as easy as people make it sound. Every time I saw someone post a picture with their mom on social media, I felt this weird mix of anger and sadness. I hated her for what she did, but I also missed her. Or maybe I missed the version of her I thought existed before Steve and Sophie came into the picture. When I was 17, my mom showed up unannounced at my grandpa's house. I was in the middle of working on a freelance project, a logo design for a local coffee shop, when I heard the knock on the door. My grandpa answered it, and the next thing I knew, she was standing in the living room. She looked different, tired. Her hair was messy, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had this defeated look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Liam," she said softly, like she was trying not to spook me. "I wanted to see you." I stared at her, not sure what to say. She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Things haven't been easy lately. Steve, he lost his job, and Sophie's struggling with school. We're barely holding things together." Translation: "We're broke, and we need help." I waited for her to get to the point, and sure enough, she did. "I know you've been doing well with your design work. Maybe you could help us out? Just until we get back on our feet." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was just so absurd. "You mean you want me to bail you out after everything you did?" I asked, crossing my arms. Her face crumpled. "Liam, I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I interrupted. "You let Steve treat me like garbage. You let Sophie ruin my life. And then you kicked me out. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a choice." She didn't try to deny it. Instead, she started crying, which only made me angrier. "I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "I should have done more to protect you." "Yeah, you should have," I snapped. "But you didn't. And now you want me to help you? Help Sophie? You've got to be kidding me." She didn't have an answer for that. I stood there for a moment, staring at the woman who was supposed to be my mom, and realized something. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little bit. "I don't owe you anything," I said finally. "And I definitely don't owe Sophie." Before she could say anything else, I walked out of the room. My grandpa must have overheard the whole thing, because when I sat down at the kitchen table, he gave me a nod of approval. "You did the right thing, kid," he said. For the first time in years, I felt free. That conversation with my mom was a turning point for me. I stopped hoping she'd change or that she'd suddenly realize what she'd done. Instead, I focused all my energy on building the life I wanted. A life where I didn't need her, or Steve, or anyone else who tried to tear me down. By the time I graduated high school, my freelance business was taking off. I wasn't making a ton of money, but it was enough to start thinking about the future. I enrolled in online classes for graphic design and programming, figuring I'd combine the two into a career. And every step of the way, I kept this one thought in the back of my mind: I'm going to prove them wrong. By the time I was 18, my freelance work had grown from side gigs into a full-on career. I was building websites, designing logos, and even coding small apps for local businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me the independence I'd been craving. I'd saved up enough to move out of my grandpa's house and into a tiny apartment, which, by the way, was basically a closet with a kitchen. Still, it was mine, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, my family, they were spiraling. Sophie's picture-perfect life started cracking first. She got into this fancy private college, because of course she did, but she didn't last long. Turns out, when you build your whole life on lies, it eventually catches up to you. Sophie had lied on her application, faked recommendation letters, and somehow managed to plagiarize her way through most of high school. When the college found out, they kicked her out without a second thought. Steve wasn't doing much better. His business ventures had always been sketchy, but now they were falling apart completely. He owed money to everyone: creditors, former clients, the government. I didn't know the details, but rumors were swirling that he'd been caught embezzling funds from one of his projects. And my mom? She was stuck in the middle of the mess, clinging to the sinking ship that was her marriage. I wasn't paying close attention to any of this. I'd unfollowed Sophie on social media ages ago, and my mom's occasional texts were easy to ignore. But one day my grandpa called me. "Did you hear about your mom?" he asked. "No," I said cautiously. "She lost the house. Bank took it." I didn't say anything. I wanted to feel something: anger, sadness, satisfaction. But I felt nothing. "They're staying with friends for now," he added. "Steve's in some legal trouble." "Shocker," I muttered. My grandpa sighed. "Just thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up, then went back to work on a project I was coding for a client. But the conversation stuck with me. It wasn't like I wanted them to fail or anything. Okay, maybe I did a little. But hearing that they'd hit rock bottom didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. Still, I couldn't help but think, they brought this on themselves. A few weeks later, I got a text from my mom. "Mom, hi Liam, can we talk?" I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes before replying. "Me, what do you want?" She didn't answer right away, but when she finally did, it was exactly what I expected. "Mom, we're in a tough spot right now. Steve is gone, Sophie's struggling, and we really need help. You're doing so well with your career. I thought maybe you could lend us a hand." I couldn't believe the audacity. "Me, you want me to help the people who ruined my life? Seriously?" "Mom, I know we've made mistakes, but we're family. That has to count for something." "Family. Yeah, right. Me. It counted for something when I was 10, and you let Steve and Sophie treat me like garbage. But now, so much. Don't text me again." I blocked her number after that. It wasn't even about being petty. It was about protecting myself. But apparently my mom doesn't give up that easily. A few months later, I was at work, freelancing from my apartment, which basically meant coding in sweatpants while eating cereal, when I got served with legal papers. My mom was suing me. Yep, you read that right. She was claiming that I owed her financial support as her child. At first I laughed, like actually laughed out loud. The sheer absurdity of it was hilarious. But as I kept reading, the anger set in. This wasn't just a desperate attempt to guilt trip me. She'd actually hired a lawyer. Luckily, my grandpa came through for me again. He connected me with his own lawyer, a retired guy who took the case because, in his words, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." When we got to court, my mom tried to play the victim. She sobbed about how hard her life had been, how Steve had manipulated her, how she'd always loved me but didn't know how to show it. The judge wasn't buying it. My lawyer presented evidence of all the years of neglect, including testimonies from teachers and neighbors who'd witnessed how I was treated. By the end of it, my mom was a blubbering mess, and the judge dismissed the case on the spot. As we left the courtroom, my mom hissed, You'll regret this, Liam. I didn't even look back. All right, everyone, before we dive into the final update, I have a small request. We put a lot of effort into finding these incredible stories for you every single day, and your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us grow and allows us to continue bringing you more amazing stories. Thank you. Now let's move to the last update. Update. Hey Reddit. So after the whole fiasco with my mom suing me, you'd think she and Sophie would just disappear from my life for good, right? Wrong. They're like weeds. You think you've pulled them out, but somehow they keep popping back up. A few months after the court case, things finally felt normal again. My freelance gigs were taking off. I'd built a solid reputation as a designer and programmer, and clients were recommending me left and right. I wasn't rich or anything, but I was paying my bills, saving up, and even upgrading my tiny apartment into a slightly less tiny apartment. Progress, right? Then one day I got a notification on Instagram. It was Sophie. She'd unblocked me. Curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on her profile. Her feed was something else. You know those people who try way too hard to look successful? That was Sophie in a nutshell. There were pictures of her in rented sports cars, captions about grind culture, and a video where she literally said, "Don't let haters stop you from living your best life." Classic Sophie. But as I scrolled further, I noticed something weird. She'd posted pictures of artwork, really bad artwork, that she claimed was hers. What caught my attention was the captions. "These pieces are available for commission. DM me for rates." At first I thought, whatever, let her embarrass herself. But then I looked closer and realized something horrifying. She was copying my work. Not just copying either. She was straight up stealing my designs, tweaking them just enough to make them look different, and then passing them off as her own. One of the logos she claimed to have designed was a project I'd done for a local coffee shop just a few months earlier. I was livid. I sent her a DM. Me. "Take my designs off your page. Now." She replied within minutes. Sophie. "Loel, what are you talking about?" Me. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't make me take this further." She blocked me immediately. Fine. If Sophie wanted to play dirty, so could I. I gathered all the proof I needed. Timestamps, client testimonials, emails, and drafts showing the original work was mine. Then I contacted Instagram's copyright team and filed a takedown request. Within a week, Sophie's account was flagged and all the stolen designs were removed. She was furious. I knew because not long after, she had her boyfriend, some wannabe influencer named Bryce, slide into my DMs. "Bryce, hey bro, I think you and Sophie just had a misunderstanding. No need to get legal about it." I left him on red, but then things escalated. One night, I came home to find a couple of cops waiting outside my apartment. Someone had anonymously reported me for selling counterfeit designs. The evidence they had? Poorly photoshopped versions of my own work, claiming it belonged to other artists. Thankfully, I'm not an idiot. I'd kept detailed records of every project I'd ever done, including timestamps and client contracts. It didn't take long to clear my name. Still, I wasn't about to let this slide. I hired a private investigator to dig into the fake report, and surprise, surprise, it was Bryce who filed it. He and Sophie had teamed up, thinking they could scare me into backing down. I pressed charges for defamation and filing a false report. Bryce panicked and threw Sophie under the bus, claiming it was all her idea. The texts between them told a different story, though. Long story short, they both got slapped with fines, and Sophie's reputation in our small community took a major hit. I thought that would be the end of it. But then, a few months later, my studio got broken into. I'd finally saved up enough to rent a small office space to work out of. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on coding, designing, and growing my business. So when I walked in one morning and saw the place trashed, I was devastated. Several of my original designs, including works in progress, were gone. At first, I thought it was a random burglary, but then I checked the security footage. It was Sophie. She'd actually broken into my studio, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses like she was some kind of low-budget criminal mastermind. I filed a police report immediately. The cops showed up at her door, and she tried to play dumb, but the evidence was overwhelming. Not only was she caught on camera, but she'd also posted pictures of the stolen designs on her Instagram, claiming they were part of her new collection. The stolen pieces were returned, but most of them were damaged beyond repair. At this point, I was done. Done with Sophie, done with my mom, done with the whole mess. I tightened security at my studio, installed an alarm system, and started focusing solely on my work. Sophie and my mom have gone radio silent since the break-in. Steve is still in prison, and Bryce dumped Sophie after their legal drama. As for me, I'm thriving. My freelance business has turned into a full-time career, and I've recently started working with bigger clients, companies I used to dream of designing for. I've even started developing my own software projects, combining my love of design and coding into something I'm really proud of. The best part? I did it all on my own. To anyone out there dealing with toxic family members, let me just say this. You don't owe them anything. Blood doesn't give them the right to ruin your life. Build your own path and don't look back.